Hi, I'm Sarah, and I'm an ADHD specialist, counsellor, coach, and CBT therapist. And today I want to talk about the comorbidities. This is a big passion of mine because the comorbidities get forgotten and they destroy lives. So first of all, if I explain what comorbidities are, the word comorbidity is a bit horrible because it always makes me think of death. So what I tend to call it instead is coexisting conditions. So if you know that, first of all, that people with ADHD, 80% of them have at least one coexisting condition. 50% of ADHD people have at least two. Now, when I was diagnosed ADHD, that was it. ADHD, just diagnosed with ADHD. But then working with clients over the years and starting to listen to them, I suddenly realised, first of all, that I'd got dyscalculia, or as you're supposed to say it, dyscalculia, but I can't say it that way, so I say dyscalculia. And I realised this because number one, I'd failed my 12 plus and nobody could understand why I'd failed my 12 plus. I was bright. I was in the top half of the class and I failed my 12 plus to the horror of my headmaster, who appealed before the results even came through. Then when the results came through, my mum appealed, and Bucks Education Authority said they couldn't put me through because I had, in their words, failed the 12 plus so spectacularly. Now, the reason for that was I had looked at these problems, which is what the 12 plus was in those days, and seen that Tom had 4 green apples and 3 grapes, and Katie had 6 red apples and 5 grapes, and Tony had 3 bananas and 4 apples. And I lost it at that point. I didn't give a toss how many apples or grapes. I didn't give a monkey's. I mean, I really didn't. My brain wouldn't work that way. And because that was what the 12 plus consisted of, I just looked at it and thought, I really don't I just don't care. So I just wrote any numbers down. I wasn't interested. And what perplexed people at the time was that I was bright. And the headmaster said if it had been English and maths and French, she'd have sailed it. Nobody worked out what was going on. Nobody thought, what's going on? Why did that girl who's bright, who's in the top, I was in the top, well, out of 31 in our class exams, I would come 8th, 10th, 4th once. I was always in that top 10 of the 31 and 15 passed. So I should have been well into that 15 passing their 12 plus. Nobody thought to look. Nobody. They were horrified and they all felt sorry for me, but nobody thought to look. Has she got anything else going on there? Is there any sort of learning difficulty or anything? Nobody thought. So there I go off to the secondary school, surrounded by people slashing their wrists and getting pregnant because that's all they wanted to do. I wanted to learn. So at the end of the first year, I came top in maths and top in English. Without me knowing, the headmistress then rang my mother and said, this child shouldn't be at this school. I've got a place for her at the grammar school. Here's the list of uniform. My mother nearly died because the year before she just splashed out on the uniform for the secondary school. She couldn't afford all the lacrosse sticks and hockey sticks and tennis and all that. She couldn't afford it. So she didn't tell me till I was 16. So I spent 4 years at a school where I didn't learn. Well, I learned in a couple of subjects, but most of the subjects I'd done more at my junior school. So for example, at my junior school, when we were 12, we were doing 3rd year grammar school maths. My whole 4 years at the secondary school didn't get close to that. So I spent 4 years bored stupid in maths. So what did I get for my maths O level? Ungraded, because I was bored stupid because of my ADHD. What did I get in my English? Loved my English teacher. She treated me with respect. She liked me. She made me read Macbeth for the whole 2 years. I was Macbeth. Nobody else played my part for 2 years. I loved her and I got an A. Again, nobody thought to look and think wildly differing grades, which I know is a sign of ADHD. Wildly differing grades, because if we love a subject, we'll do brilliantly at it. If we don't, like I did with my maths, thought she was an idiot, didn't like her, thought she was very rude, and also didn't get anywhere near what I'd been doing when I was 12. So of course I was bored stupid for the whole 4 years in maths, so I got ungraded. Now, did Bucks Education or any other education in the country, do they look at that and go, wildly differing grades? Is that indicative of anything? Yes, it's indicative of ADHD. They've only got to know that to look at those grades and think, hello, what's going on there? Now, I didn't pick up my dyscalculia, my severe dyspraxia with 1% processing skills and 1% motor skills and my sensory processing disorder, my 3 coexisting conditions of ADHD or comorbidities, till I was in my 50s, because I was working with clients who'd already got these diagnoses. So I worked out for myself that I'd got these. Now, what makes me angry, I'm 58 now. So what does it matter? I've dealt my whole life with having dyscalculia, dyspraxia. I've dealt with it. I've got the bruises, the broken bones to show for it. But no, I didn't have a name for it. I just thought I was gormless and clumsy and hopeless. And I've grown up hearing all that stuff, that I'm gormless and hopeless and I don't pay attention and all the rest of it, because nobody knew I had these conditions. What makes me angry is it's still going on today. Now, I was at school back in the 70s. Fair enough. If they weren't advanced enough, they should have been, but they weren't in the 70s. This is the 2000s now. This is still going on today. This is what is not acceptable. Teachers are not trained in ADHD or the comorbidities. They don't think it's their job to pick up whether a child has got dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, any of the rest of them. And fair enough, why should they? Because they're not trained in it. A teacher I know who qualified just over a year ago told me that in the 3 years she did teacher training, they spent 1 half day of 3 hours on SEN, S-E-N, special educational needs. She herself, this girl, this teacher, is ADHD, ASD and dyslexic. And even she was horrified that they only spent 3 hours out of 3 years, sounds like a joke, but it's not, talking about special educational needs. How are these teachers supposed to spot these conditions? They're not, quite simply. So if they don't diagnose them, who does? So next we look at the paediatricians. Nah, not interested, because they diagnose mental health conditions. So they will look for ADHD and ASD. They'll look for anxiety. They'll look for depression. They'll look for psychosis, all that sort of stuff. They won't look for the comorbidities. So here's all these comorbidities kicking around here. And these are the ones that affect people at school. You can imagine how much dyslexia affects people at school. My dyscalculia massively affected me at school. Dysgraphia, that's one of the coexisting conditions a lot of people don't know about. It's when you've got all the information in your head, you know all the answers, but the message from the brain to the hands is corrupted. So kids who've got it all up here and can speak about it till the cows come home, but they can't write it or type it because the message doesn't go to their hands. Teachers aren't trained even to spot that. So I have worked with clients who've got the whole shebang. They've got dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, all of it. And they're sitting at school and teachers think they're absolutely hopeless. The kid feels absolutely hopeless because he can't do anything that everybody else can do. And it's because nobody's diagnosed these comorbidities. So one of my big passions, I've got several, but one of them is to get these coexisting conditions recognised and to make a decision who diagnoses them. It's not the GP because they're not qualified to. It's not the paediatrician because they deal with mental health. And it's not teachers because they're not qualified to spot or identify, and they're trained not to say anything to parents because it can be offensive and all the rest of it. So where do these comorbidities end up going then? They end up affecting the child or the adult massively, but them not knowing why. And I literally was diagnosed ADHD at the age of 51. That's shocking enough. But with all the others, including severe dyspraxia, when I was 55 and 56. How outrageous is that? And I speak to parents, I work with parents all over the country, and it's the comorbidities that are very often affecting a child at school. You imagine a child that's got dysgraphia, let's say they've got dysgraphia and dyslexia. So they struggle with spelling, punctuation, sentence construction, paragraphing, all that sort of thing. They really struggle with that. And then they've got dysgraphia, which means they can't write most of it down. How much is that affecting a child? And yet nobody's taking responsibility for diagnosing it. What I now know is that there are specialists who diagnose these things. So, for example, when I got my dyspraxia diagnosed, I had to go to a occupational therapist. Ditto, a sensory processing disorder diagnosis, went to a specialist, also an occupational therapist, but they both specialised in different things. So I got my sensory processing with one, my dyspraxia with another. And my dyscalculia, I actually got through a psychiatrist who then admitted that he probably shouldn't have done it because it should have been an educational psychologist. But when you ring educational psychologists up, they will tell you they only work with people up to the age of 26. So what happens to all these adults who are out here, who've been missed, who have got these lots and lots and lots of diagnoses, and nobody's interested? That's bad enough. What's worse is the kids. All these kids are in school and nobody's taking responsibility for these coexisting conditions. Teachers don't think it's their job. GP knows sod all about it. Paediatrician deals in mental health. Hello? Who's dealing with the coexisting conditions then? It's absolutely appalling. I think it should be the teachers. I think teachers should be trained to spot it. They're in the perfect place for it. They're seeing these kids write, try and do maths, try and do sentences. The teachers should be trained in how to spot it. And there should be a referral route, a really definite referral route, that if either the parent, the child or the teacher think that there is a problem in any of these areas, there should be a very clear referral route through the school, through to a specialist. That's got to be the way to do it, in my view, because there's no other way. It's the teachers that have got to spot it. But at the moment, the comorbidities, they swim around in this kind of grey area. And yet I know they're impacting people usually more than the ADHD. My ADHD, it means I think too quite fast and I get bored and I'm a bit abusive and a bit impulsive and all that. But I can deal with most of that. My dyspraxia, that's what's knackered my knee because I fell over on it twice within an hour. That's what broke this finger. My dyspraxia is why I drop dinner down myself every night and why I drive myself nuts at having to have clean t-shirts every night. It's my dyspraxia and my dyscalculia that have affected me, and also my sensory processing disorder, which has nearly got me killed a couple of times when I've been very aggressive to people who are too noisy. So my sensory processing disorder has also affected me. But nobody bothered to pick them up. It's like they don't matter. Yes, they do. They matter hugely, and they especially matter to children who are at school and anybody who's in education. So I'm very, very passionate about raising this issue of coexisting conditions and making people take responsibility. And for me, that's got to start with the school. They are in the ideal place to pick this up, and they need to listen to parents. If parents are saying, look, this is what he does at home, the teachers need to believe them and to accept that and then to do something about it and to make the necessary referrals. This situation needs to change. It really does.